Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Yu-Gi-Oh video, and today I want to do another beginner's guide on a deck that I've really been enjoying, that I've really been liking. So what this is going to be is for the Mimighoul deck, and if you haven't seen my other videos, I've done one on Dragon Maids, I've done one on Madolche. I don't do these very often, and that's mainly because I like to take my time and use a deck a lot and really understand it before I make a video on it. And I'm pretty busy. Like, I only play Yu-Gi-Oh roughly like once a week at my locals. So it takes me a while to get enough matches in to feel like I'm comfortable with a deck. So what I'm going to do in this guide is I'm going to just talk about in general what the Mimighoul archetype does, what it is meant to do, explain the base concept of how it goes, and then I'm going to show you my pretty much pure Mimighoul deck profile that I'm using right now at locals, and it does pretty well, right? So this is going to be for like a beginner who just wants to learn how to play the deck, what are the main concepts of what it's doing, and then you could eventually, if you wanted to mix in other archetypes and try to play other things with it, you could totally do that. On a side note, just so you guys know, you might notice during my videos like this when I do record with my camera here, this is just my phone camera. I don't have an actual dot cam, so it will once in a while make like weird random yellow boxes over everything. I've had people ask me about that in the comments. That's why that's happening, but shouldn't deter us too much from the video, right? So let's jump in. And what I'm going to talk about first is I'm just going to talk about just in general, like what the archetype is meant to do overall. So the theme with this deck, which I think is really cool, is that these are mimics in a dungeon. So the idea is a mimic is something that looks like a treasure chest, but it actually has like monsters or like something bad inside. So the general idea of the deck is your monsters are mimics, and you want to set them to your opponent's field face down, and to your opponent, the idea is it is like a glimmering treasure. And the opponent, based on effects in your deck, they're going to be enticed to open the treasure, and that means they're flipping that monster face up. When those mimics get flipped, they actually do bad things to your opponent, good things to you, and they come to your field then as a monster that can attack. So that's generally the idea of the deck. Most of the main deck monsters are level 1, so the extra deck is filled with rank 1 monsters or just generic links that you could play to get some power from the extra deck, right? And then there's one level 4 normal monster that is very, very powerful as well. So we're going to go ahead and go through the deck now. So what we're running is we're running 3 Mimighoul Archfiend. I would say most people agree that this is probably one of the best ones in the deck. The one thing I will say is all of the level 1s have one effect in common. And that effect is you can special summon them to your opponent's field in face down defense position. Each Mimighoul can only be special summoned once per turn this way. So if I have like 3 Archfiends in my hand, I can't just put all 3 of them on my opponent's field. But I can set one of them to my opponent's field, and then the other effects I could activate once per turn as well. Mimighoul Archfiend specifically, if it is normal or special summoned to my own field, I can take an opponent's face down monster and flip it face up. So the main way you use this guy, it's a great way to force your opponent's things to flip up so that you get their effects. The other thing is if this monster is flipped up, it'll do 2 effects. The person who controls it will have to discard a card, and then the opponent draws a card. So the general idea is if I set this to my opponent's field, if it gets flipped up, they discard a card, I draw a card, and then this will come over to my side of the field. So every Mimighoul, when they get flipped up on your opponent's field, they will do their effects first, and then once those resolve, they come back to your side of the field. If your field is full and they don't have room, they will stay on your opponent's side of the field. So this guy's basically opponent, who controls it will discard 1, you draw 1. Okay. Then we have 3 Mimighoul Dragon. This is really good because if you summon it, normal or special to your field, you search your deck for any Mimighoul spell or trap card. This is the main way you're going to get Dungeon, which is your field card. That's usually what you want to do with this guy. Once again, you can also set it to your opponent's field, and if it flips up on your opponent's field, it will destroy all face-up non-Mimighoul monsters on their side of the field. So this guy's kind of like a Raigeki in a way. It can just blow up the field and really disrupt your opponent. So it's very, very good. And then once again, it's really valuable for the search as well. The one thing I should say, though, is the Mimighoul flip effects, they do not go off. Like if I do a battle phase and attack it while it's face down, they will not go off. They only go off like during a main phase. So you have to either, your opponent has to choose to flip them, or you have to force it face up with a card effect, like for example, Mimighoul Archfiend, right? Then we run 3 Mimighoul Slime. This is one of the newest ones that just came out. Mimighoul Slime is great. Because if it flips up on your opponent's field, you special summon any Mimighoul from your deck to your field. And so typically what you'll do with Slime is you will summon a Mimighoul that gets a really good on-summon effect, like for example, Dragon. So let's say Slime flips on their field, you summon Dragon to your field, Slime will come back to my field, so now I have Slime and Dragon. Dragon was just summoned, so then I get to search for a spell and trap card. Okay, Mimighoul Master is another one you might want to get depending on the situation. We'll talk about him in a moment. But Mimighoul Slime, kind of the theme of the ones that just came out in the new set. So that's going to be Slime, Armor, and Fairy. They all have effects that let you special summon them to your field. That's significant because with the new support, they did get like some rank 1 Xyz monsters, and in order to get an Xyz monster, you need a minimum of 2 Mimighouls on the field to get them. So by adding all these Mimighouls that can special summon themselves, it really allows you to get more bodies on board. Now, Slime, I would say, is the most difficult to special summon out of them, but if you're doing it turn 1, you can get it quite easily. It's just your opponent has to control more monsters than you. You can special summon Slime to your field. And once again, you don't get anything for summoning Slime to your field. He doesn't have an on-summon effect, but it's just that idea you want to put the body on board to get something from your extra deck, right? Then we have Mimighoul Fairy. Now, I'm just running her at 2. With Mimighoul Fairy and then Armor, we'll just put them both out. I only run 1 Armor. These are more notable because they have very easy summoning effects, so they're really easy to summon to your field. So Mimighoul Fairy, you just have to control a Mimighoul and you special summon it. So that's great, because it would be like, hey, I normal Dragon, special Fairy, Dragon gets me a search, and I've got 2 on board to right away go into an Xyz play, right? Armor is just your opponent has to control a monster, but it doesn't have to be more than you. So to me, these are the 2 easier ones to summon, and that's why I like them in the deck, as I like them as easy summoning materials. Mimighoul Fairy, this one, if it flips on your opponent's field, they can't activate the effect of monsters summoned from the hand that turn, or special summoned from the hand. So there could be some applications where that's good. I find myself not getting that off too much. I'm more or less just using Fairy because I want to special her to my field so that I have Xyz material. Mimighoul Armor, if it flips up on your opponent's field, then my Mimighoul monsters can't be destroyed by battle that turn. That's not like the craziest thing either. Once again, Armor's there mostly because I just want a special summon target, right? Then the other one that we have for the last level 1 is Cerberus. I only run at 1. I would say most people run Cerberus at 1 or 0. Cerberus, I feel like by far is the worst one. I pretty much just have it there is another named Mimighoul, because what you're going to find is this deck is going to do a lot of summoning and searching for Mimighouls, and in a grind state, you're going to need a lot of bodies out there. You just need a lot of options to get. So at the very least, it's just another named Mimighoul I could set to my opponent's field, because just setting something to your opponent's field can be good. What Cerberus does, it doesn't get any effect when you summon it to your own field, and it can't special summon itself, so that's why it's bad. But it has an okay effect if it gets flipped on your opponent's field. They have to banish the top 3 cards of their deck, and if they get a monster, they have to special summon one of those to your field. So it's good because it can just get you an extra body, but the reason I don't like it as much is, 1, there's only a chance that they banish a monster. Like, they could just banish 3 spell and traps, and then you don't get anything off of it. The other thing is the monster that you get probably won't be a level 1, so you're pretty much just using it for link plays, which can be good, but you can't go into like your Mimighouls with it most likely, which is what you're going to want to do. So it's a way to get a free extra body. Banishing from the top of your opponent's deck, I mean, there could be some disruption there, right? Your opponent could be playing a card that's a 1-of and it gets banished. It might mess up their strategy a little bit. Some opponents might actually like their stuff getting banished, so there could be some risks there as well. So this is something usually I'll end up siding out in between games, depending on if I feel like I need it or not, but definitely the worst of the batch. And once again, all of these ratios, you can kind of adjust them up to your needs, but Slime, Dragon, and Archfiend are all fantastic. So at least 2 to 3 of each of those, I would say. I've seen some people play Fairy at 1 if you want to. You'll get a feel for it as you go, right? And then the last of the Mimighoul monsters is Mimighoul Master. This is the only one that is a level 4. He doesn't operate on flipping or anything. You can't set him to your opponent's field. He's a little bit more unique that way. So he has a couple of things is... if your opponent controls a face down monster or you control another Mimighoul monster, he cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. And then as a quick effect during the opponent's main phase, he can flip one of their face down monsters face up. So Master is a great way to kind of quick effect, flip something up and have something bad happen. So a general idea with this is maybe on the previous turn, you've set a dragon to their field. Your opponent tries summoning out a bunch of monsters to do a play. I could quick effect flip the dragon, and then the dragon's going to destroy all of their monsters and then come to my field, right? The other thing that's actually probably the best part about Master, to be honest, is that when you summon him, you get to add a Mimighoul monster from your deck to your hand. so he's a search option, right? So that part's really good because you get a search off of it when it's summoned. But Mimighoul Master, being that he's a level 4, you can't go into your rank 1s for your XCs, but you could still link him off, but usually you want to keep him on board because he's pretty good that way. So that's going to be it for like the main deck Mimighoul monsters and kind of just explaining what they do. Okay. Next, we'll just go into other monsters. So the only other monsters is I just run 3 Ash for hand traps. When it comes down to hand traps and whatever, that's going to be kind of up to you. But that's the initial monster lineup for me. So that's what I'm running there as a fairly pure Mimighoul deck. Then for spells and traps, we're definitely going to run 3 Dungeon. Dungeon is kind of the core of the deck and what's going to make it operate really well. What Mimighoul Dungeon does is once per turn, you can add a Mimighoul from your graveyard or your deck to your hand. This is insane because it's every turn, it's giving me consistency. It's going to guarantee I have a Mimighoul every turn, provided my opponent doesn't destroy it. And the fact that you can get Mimighouls back from the graveyard is pretty significant. Because what you're going to find, once again, in a grind game, and this deck isn't like a quick OTK deck usually. You're usually in for some longer games with this deck. Dungeon's great because you can recycle from the graveyard, because eventually you're going to run out of Mimighouls in your deck if the game gets pretty grindy. So yeah, the fact you can recycle from the graveyard is great. And then this is the card that kind of entices your opponent to flip the Mimighouls you give them. So what Dungeon's going to do is, if either player controls a face down monster, they cannot normal summon. And if they special summon a monster, any special summoned monster cannot attack the turn they are summoned. So it's going to stop your opponent from doing a normal summon, which most decks want to do that at some point. A lot of monsters get good effects when they are normal summoned, right? It's also really going to slow your opponent down. It's going to guarantee they can't OTK you, because a typical turn is I special summon a bunch of stuff and attack you for game. Well, they're not going to be able to attack with anything they summon unless they either deal with the field card or they have to flip the stuff up. So the idea is on your turn, you want to, your turn 1, you always want to get Dungeon if possible. And there's ways to search it and get to that, which we've talked about with like Dragon is the main way that you get it, but there's other ways you can get to it. But then you want to have stuff set on their field, so your opponent's going to feel like, hey, if I want to normal summon and attack with special summon monsters, I'm going to have to flip these up. So it's going to encourage your opponent to flip the stuff up, just eat those bad effects, and then give the Mimighouls back to you, right? So that's what Dungeon's going to do. Then we've got 3 Mimighoul Makers. This has 2 effects. One is you get to search for any 2 flip effect monsters from your deck, and then you shuffle them, and randomly one of those will go face down to your opponent's field. The other one goes to your hand, and then you immediately normal summon a monster. Okay, I will talk about Mimighoul Maker. So what I'll do is I'll go through the deck. I want to show a couple of like main combos, but I'll explain kind of the choices I do when I do Mimighoul Maker, so that you guys understand how that works and what's the best monsters to pick with that, because you're gonna have a lot of choices. The other thing Mimighoul Maker can do is, if your opponent special summons a monster as kind of a quick effect, you can banish it to flip one of their monsters face up. So it's a good way to interrupt what they're doing. So you have, once again, say Dragon face down on their field, they special summon, you can banish that and then flip the Dragon up and destroy whatever they special summon, right? That's a pretty basic interaction you can do with Mimighoul Maker. And that's it for Mimighoul spells and traps. There's another Mimighoul, or not spells and traps, but just spells. There's one more Mimighoul spell called Mimighoul Fork, which I tried it at first, but I felt like I didn't like it enough, but I'll talk about it, because I'm going to talk about some extra cards you could try, some other known strategies with Mimighoul, just in case you want to try them, even though I am currently not using them, right? So then for other spells, we're just running Called by the Grave, which is a generic really good card. Banish something from your opponent's graveyard, negate its effects. Notably in this deck, I'm going to run 3 Triple Tactics Talent and 2 Triple Tactics Thrust. Talent and Thrust are really, really good in Mimighouls, because for those of you that are not familiar with them, they have very good effects, but you can only activate them if your opponent has activated a monster effect during your main phase, right? What's cool about it is when you set a Mimighoul to their field and you force it to flip up, that counts as your opponent activating a monster effect. So you set the Mimighoul, force it to flip, and then Thrust and Talent are active, right? Thrust is going to let you search your deck for any normal spell card, which there's a lot of great options. You could search for Maker. You can't search for Dungeon, but you could search for, which I have in here, you can search for Terraforming, and then use Terraforming to get Dungeon. So Thrust can be a way to directly get to Dungeon. You can get Maker. You can get Another spell that I run is 1-for-1. Not everyone will play that. That's another one. And then Mimighoul, Room, and Infinite Impermanence. Those are 2 good trap cards that you'll see in a minute that you can search for. So there's some great options. Or with Thrust, you can search for Talent, and then the same turn you can just activate Talent because the monster effect was already activated. Talent is going to let you either draw 2 cards. You can take control of an opponent's monster till the end of the turn, or you can look at your opponent's hand and rip a card, which can be really, really good turn 1. You can completely disrupt your opponent turn 1. And Talent and Thrust, are cards that you wouldn't commonly play turn 1. You would have to get like Ashed or Drolled or something to be able to do it. But it's nice where you can kind of on the offensive force that to allow it to be activated. So I think playing a Thrust and Talent package is really, really good here. And then once again, Terraforming is just to get the field card. 1-for-1. You just send a monster from your hand to the graveyard and special summon a level 1 monster. So I like 1-for-1 just for the consistency of that. I really want to get dungeon turn 1. So that 1-for-1 basically comboed with any other monster can guarantee get me a dragon, and then dragon can go into the field card. So to me, I just like it as a nice consistency piece to get that. Then we have Mimighoul Charm. I guess this is another Mimighoul. Now, I've seen a lot of builds that don't run this at all. I kind of like it, but I can also see the rationale for not running it. So if you don't want to run Charm, you definitely don't have to. It's a continuous one that says if a Mimighoul monster is flipped on your opponent's field during the main phase once per turn, you can randomly pick a card in their extra deck, and if it can be summoned, it gets special summoned to your own field, which can be kind of crazy. If it can't be summoned, though, it gets banished from the extra deck. So I like this for 2 reasons. One is it gives you bodies to play with on your field, and sometimes you can just get very powerful monsters. The other thing that's kind of good about it is it takes those options away from my opponent's extra deck where you might get a monster they really needed and then they can't operate because of it. And extra decks, Modern Yu-Gi-Oh can get kind of tight where a lot of people are just playing 15 one-ofs in the extra deck. So you hit that one-of that they wanted, it's going to be gone, right? So Mimighoul Charm, I think, is quite interesting. And then I have Ghostrick Shot. I will talk about that a little bit later. This is specifically for a specific combo that I have. There's a Ghostrick kind of setup you do that revolves around the extra deck. Ghostrick Shot, if you're not doing the extra deck combo I talk about in a minute, you don't run this at all. And it can be a little bit of a risky play because you really don't want to draw it. Like, it's a really bad draw. So, if you decide you don't like the Ghostrick combo, you definitely can take that out. But I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the spell lineup. Okay, I personally have played it enough that I do really like the Ghostrick combo, so we will talk about that. So for the traps, you're going to have Mimighoul Room. Mimighoul Room at 3 is amazing. It's an incredible card. What this card is going to do, it's going to special summon a Mimighoul monster from your hand or deck to your opponent's field, and then you can take a face-up card on the field and flip it face down. Okay. It also has a graveyard effect where you could banish it to return any number of Mimighouls from your field to your hand. So the return from your field to your hand can be good if you want to push stuff back into your hand to either set to your opponent's field, or you want to use their summon effect to get a search off again or something like that. But the main way that you use this is you want to get Dungeon out and then be able to play this on your opponent. Because what you're going to find with Dungeon, if I play Dungeon, set a couple of things to their field, the idea is I want to lock them out in normal summoning and being able to attack with their special summon monsters. But good players, they will just flip those and eat the effects and then continue their turn, and they usually can push through it. What Mimighoul Room is going to do is the moment your opponent's about to not have a face down, you can flip this in response, set a monster to their field face down, and because it was summoned that turn, they are not allowed to change the battle position of it the turn that it is summoned. So Room helps you lock them into Dungeon so that they are forced to not be able to normal summon and not attack with special summon monsters. So if they don't have an out to the field card, putting Room down is going to pretty much lock them out. Now, there are some decks that do have the ability to tribute away face down cards or get rid of it that way. Then yeah, they can operate if they have any way to get rid of your face down without actually flipping it, then they can kind of get out of the situation. But the problem is they can't normal summon. That includes normal settings, so they can't tribute your face down away to try to normal summon a monster because they can't even attempt the summon, and they can't tribute it away to do a face down because a normal set that's still considered a normal summon. So they would have to use some other type of effect. So for example, Fire Kings, they have a lot of effects that can just destroy one of their own monsters. That's a really common way that I've had players deal with that, is they can use a Fire King deck, they destroy the face down, they don't have to flip it, and then they're free to do what they want. But that's an example. But in most cases, Room is going to kind of lock people down. And then I just run 3 Imperms. And that's pretty much the whole deck. Imperm is just negate a monster effect, right? So you really like that. So that's my main deck. Now let's talk about the extra deck, and then I'll kind of show some combos and explain some things there, right? So in the extra deck, let's talk about the Mimighoul monsters first. So these are what were newly added. So I've got 2 giant Mimighouls and 2 Mimighoul thrones. What's really great is before the new support came out, with Mimighoul, you kind of had to really depend on the extra deck in other ways and use other like mechanics to try to win. I would say the deck felt kind of weak on its own before this new support came, but now I would say Mimighoul very independently on its own can kind of take you down without needing the assistance of outside sources, right? So Giant Mimighoul is amazing. Both of these, by the way, you just need 2 level 1s to summon them, which is really easy to do. When Giant Mimighoul is summoned, you get to search your deck for any Mimighoul card. So this is another way you could get Dungeon, or you could search for a monster, whatever you want, and add it to your hand. The other thing that's cool about Giant Mimighoul is that your other Mimighouls that are not Xyz monsters can attack directly as long as your opponent controls a face down. This is great, because the other issue with Mimighoul, right, is you're trying to set stuff to their field, but then how do I attack them because they've got those blockers, right? And you don't want to attack your own Mimighouls because when they flip up during the battle phase, they don't get their effects. So it was like counterproductive. So Giant Mimighoul solves that huge problem that says, hey, now I can set stuff to your field, which I want to do, and I still have a way to attack you directly. Unless I feel like I have enough to attack for game, then sure, I could beat over it and try to attack for game. The other thing that it can do is you can detach a material from it, and for each face-down monster they control, you can target one of their face-up cards and destroy them. So it's good for clearing cards as well. So I could bring out Giant Mimighoul, set 2 things to their field, and maybe they got a face-up field card and a face-up monster. I can detach and pop 2 of them, which is really, really great, right? Mimighoul Throne, very, very good as well. What Mimighoul Throne can do is you can detach one to special summon a Mimighoul Master from your hand or deck. So this is a great way to get Master out. And then as a quick effect, you can basically equip it to Mimighoul Master as an equip card. It gains 1,000 attack. And then for each material that Throne had when you did that effect, you get to target and bounce your opponent's cards. So if you summon Throne inherently, it's got 2 materials. So if I already have a Master, I do not need to detach to summon a Master. I can do the quick effect, equip to the Master, and I get 2 bounces off of that. Typically, you're only going to get 1 bounce because you're usually detaching to get the Master, and then as a quick effect, you can bounce. So remember, it is a quick effect, right? So during the opponent's turn, they maybe summon a tuner because they want to do a synchro play. You can, or you just wait till they bring out a synchro monster or something from the extra deck. You can quick effect, equip it to it, bounce, and disrupt what they're doing, right? So that's pretty much what Throne does. Makes that very, very good, right? Some other rank 1s. You can do number 13. So there's Punishment and Crime. There's 2 of these. You could honestly run either one or both, but I'm just running Crime. It just has an effect that allows you to flip your opponent's face down monsters face up. So it's just a nice option where if I don't get what I need to force a flip and I really want to force a flip, this basically just means any 2 level 1s I can put on the field gives me a way to force flip one of their things, right? The other one is Ghostrick Dullahan. This gets into the Ghostrick combo, so I'm going to go over that in a second. Let me just go over some of the other pieces here. So we have Downward Magician, we have Zeus, and we have Typhon, okay? These are just generic good Xyz monsters you can use. So the general idea with Zeus is that as long as you attacked and battled with an Xyz monster, you can overlay this on top, and this has a quick effect to detach 2 materials and basically wipe the board. So it's just a good way to deal with difficult boards. So a normal situation is, let's say I bring out any of my rank 1s, I have the ability to attack and survive. Then what I do is main phase 2, Downward Magician can overlay over any rank 3 or lower monster. So you put Downward Magician on top of it, and then you put Zeus on top of that. And the reason why you do Downward is you just want more materials, because the more materials Zeus has, the more times he can do his quick effect. Okay, and then Typhon I think is just a really good generic one you can run. As long as your opponent had special summoned 2 or more monsters from the extra deck on their previous turn, you can just overlay that for free on any of your monsters that has the highest attack. And then he makes it so monsters with 3,000 or more attack can't activate effects, which is pretty good, right? And he's got 2,900, so just a nice beefy option that you can grab. And then there's 2 Link monsters. I run Relinquish Anima and SP Little Knight. Little Knight's just a really good generic monster, especially now with the release of Quarter Century Bonanza. Little Knight is finally readily available at an affordable price, so I think players now can just get Little Knight, right? You could also run IP in Little Knight. I would run IP, I just kind of just didn't have room. If there's a card I feel like I'm not using, I'll probably put IP in, because IP and the Little Knight's just a good combo. Relinquish Anima, I like running in any deck that runs level 1 monsters. You just exceed it, or you just link it off with 1 level 1 monster, and you just can basically, as long as he's pointing to one of your opponent's monsters, he can just equip it for free. So my opponent has something really powerful straight across, you know, the extra zone, then I will equip it, and then it gains the attack and it gets rid of their monster. Now, savvy players, if they're playing against Mimighoul, they're going to know that a lot of Mimighoul players will run this. So like the people at my locals that are very skilled, they just flat out never summon something across from an extra zone. So I can never use it, but depends on who you're playing. If they're not thinking about it, it's a good option. If you wanted to cut it, if you feel like the players at your locals are too skilled, they're always going to avoid Anima, then maybe you put an IP or something else, right? So that's it for that extra deck stuff. Now I'm going to talk about the Ghostrick line and explain how this works, okay? So the Ghostrick line looks like this. You have Dullahan, you've got 2 Ghostrick Angels of Mischief, you've got F-Zero Utopic Future, and F-Zero Utopic Draco Future. I like this combo. The big negative with this combo is you're running Ghostrick Shot in the main deck, which is a very dead draw. And this combo eats up a lot of the extra deck. So those are the 2 biggest negatives. So this combo eats up 5 of my 15 extra deck slots. And once again, you're putting a card in your main deck that's a dead draw. So I do get that there's a lot of negatives to it. But there's a lot of positive in that you're ending on Draco Future, which is going to have a decent amount of materials, and it's a quick effect monster negate. And it negates a monster effect and then takes control of it. It's very powerful, right? So it's a great turn 1 open. So to me, I think Utopic Draco Future is very much worth running to try this out. But if you feel like you don't like this combo, then you don't have to run it, right? So the way the combo works is you simply, just have 2 level 1s, you bring out Dullahan, right? And then with Dullahan, you can just literally overlay Angel of Mischief on top. Her effect is you can just overlay her on top of Ghostrick XCs for free. Then what you do with Ghostrick Angel, she has an effect where you can detach material. So you would detach the Dullahan, and you search your deck for any Ghostrick card. So then what you do is you search your deck for Ghostrick Shot. So you go ahead and that's where you get Ghostrick Shot. You activate Ghostrick Shot. This special summons any Ghostrick from your graveyard. So you summon Dullahan back. Okay, and then that goes to the grave. And then all you do is, since this is another Ghostrick monster, you can overlay the second Ghostrick Angel on top. Then what happens is you summon F-Zero Utopic Future, and the way you summon it is you just have to overlay any 2 monsters of the same rank. So you overlay the 2 angels, all the materials they have will fall off. So you just have the 2 angels, and then that goes into Utopic Future. And then Draco Future can just overlay on top of the Utopic. So the idea is all you need is 2 level 1s on the field, and it turns into Utopic Draco Future, which is a 3,000 beater that can quick effect negate a monster effect and take control of it. So I think that's a very, very good monster. And the Mimighoul deck doesn't inherently have like quick effect negates in it, right? So that's why I'm running Infinite Impermanence, and you've got Ash Blossom. Like, it's good disruption, but this is nice to have is just a quick effect disruption piece that you can put on your field turn 1. So that's why I run that line. But once again, if you feel like the negatives outweigh the positives on that, you don't feel like it's your style, then that just opens up your extra deck to play a lot more things. Okay, so that's pretty much the main deck line and how that works, right? So let me talk about my side deck. Now the side deck is very flexible. And it's going to depend. You always base it on your locals or whatever event you're going to, right? So what my side deck looks like, I always like having back row removal. So I'm running 2 Lightning Storms and a Harpy's Feather Duster just because and these, like, I always side these in if I'm going second, right? It's really great. Your opponent sets up a big board and then you blow it up. I've got Droll and Lockbird. Once again, it's going to depend on your locals if people, you know, you want to stop them from drawing. I've got Nibiru. If I know I'm playing a deck that just summons like crazy, Nibiru is a great side to have. Oh, I got 3 Nibirus actually. And then I like 3 evenly matched. I think that's just a good generic side deck card you can run. It allows you to let your opponent go first, and then you just go second and pretty much blow up their entire board that they're trying to make. Dimensional Barrier, I think, is just very powerful right now. A lot of decks running, you know, Synchro, Fusion, Auric Seas is like a main line. But you side it because some decks it doesn't do very well against. And then specifically, I really like Summoning Curse, but I like it more as a side deck card than a main deck card. Summoning Curse, you really want only if you know you're going first. And what Summoning Curse does, you have to pay 500. It's a continuous spell. It sits out there. You have to pay 500 life points every turn, and it's mandatory. You have to do it. But what it says is when a player special summons a monster, the controller of that card has to banish a card from their hand. This is ridiculously good going first in Mimighoul, because if I can activate this, when I special a Mimighoul to their field and face down, they have to banish from their hand. So if I open Summoning Curse and like, say 2 or 3 Mimighouls, I can just go Summoning Curse, bam, bam, bam. They have to immediately banish 3 cards out of their hand before they've even had a turn. It can really mess them up, right? But you don't want to main deck it, because if you're going second, your opponent's already done all of their plays. They might not even have much of a hand at that point. It's just a dead card in your hand. So I think this is very much just relegated to a side deck, like I know I'm going first type of card, but I think it's very interesting. I would say if you don't like Summoning Curse, you definitely don't have to run it. You could side some other things. So that's pretty much the side deck there. Now, before we go into just showing some combos, I want to talk about some other cards that Mimighoul players have dabbled with and things in the past. But a lot of these things have kind of become outdated, because this was back before the deck had like the really good support that it needed. So there's kind of a line here where we'll talk about like Master of Ham, Instant Fusion, Guard Dog, and Sol and Luna. To me, these 4, they're kind of like a package if you want to play them together, but I feel like it's just too inconsistent, right? So the general idea is this idea of Guard Dog sounds really great. What it is, it's a flip effect that says your opponent cannot special summon that turn. So you might think, wow, that sounds really great. The problem is that you would have to set it face down to your field. And what you'll find is, even though you're the Mimighoul player, you don't want face downs on your field, because then you get the negative effects of dungeon. So that's one thing is you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you want face downs on your field. The other thing is if I simply set it and then pass, my opponent, it doesn't really hurt my opponent, because my opponent's not going to attack it or typically deal with it or flip it up for any reason until they've done all of their combos already. Their board is set. So Guard Dog only works if I am able to set it and then have some type of quick effect that is going to flip it on my opponent's turn to mess them up. And inherently within the Mimighoul deck, there isn't a lot of ways you can do it. I think Mimighoul Master is the main way you would do it. So you would have to open Mimighoul Master, have open Guard Dog, or find a way to get to Guard Dog and have it out. The thing with all of these is they all require like kind of multiple things to be happening. They all require like more than one card for the combo to work. And I don't like doing that if I can help it, because the more cards required for a combo to work, the less consistent it is. If I just get Guard Dog with nothing to help it, it's just a dead draw. So that's why I don't run it. The idea here is Master of Ham has the ability to like search your deck for a flip effect and put it on the field. You don't want to run polymerization in the deck. So Instant Fusion, you can just bring it out for free. And then when it's summoned or when it's flipped up, you can special a flip effect monster. So Master of Ham is just a tool to consistently get to Guard Dog. But then once again, you have to have a way to flip the Guard Dog. This is where Sol and Luna comes in. Sol and Luna is just a quick effect that says you have to target one of your monsters and one of your opponent's monsters, and you flip both of them. So you change the battle position. So if it's face up, you put it face down. If it's face down, you flip it face up. So Sol and Luna, once again, it's one of these cards that sounded really good when Mimighoul first came out, but in practice, it's actually not that great. Because if let's say I don't have Guard Dog, right? And they have face downs, you might think, oh, it's great. I can force their face downs to flip up and I get the Mimighoul effects. But you also have to target one of yours. And that means you would have a Mimighoul that you would flip face down, and you don't want it face down on your field, because then your opponent's going to get it and they're going to get the good effects. So Sol and Luna basically requires you to want to put flip effects face down on your field, which inherently you shouldn't want to do, because your dungeon's going to hurt you then. So once again, it's that combo of like, if I draw Soul and Luna without Guard Dog or stuff I want to flip, it's kind of a dead card. If I draw Guard Dog without other means to get it flipped up, it's kind of a dead card, right? Instant Fusion, its only purpose is to get Master of Ham to do Guard Dog stuff. That can definitely be a dead draw later in game, right? So this is stuff I just want to show it in case you make Mimighouls and you want to try it yourself. That's a thing you can certainly try, and maybe you'll have better consistency with it than me. Maybe you'll find a way to make it more efficient, right? Another card I think is a very good card you can run is Where Art Thou. I was actually just very recently running this card until, you know, Triple Tactics Thrust just became readily available, so I opted to take this out for Thrust, but I may go back to this. This is a great card. If you control a level 1 monster, you can just add a level 1 monster from your deck to your hand, and then, so once again, it just allows you to search for whatever you want. The negative part about the card is if you don't normal summon that monster at the end of the turn, or a monster with that same name, if a monster with that name has not been normal summoned during the turn, you take 2,000 points of damage. So there's a couple of methods with this, right? Like I can search for a level 1, get it and normal summon it. So maybe I search for dragon, get it, summon it. That's great. And then I don't take the damage. Or I just search for whatever I want. I don't worry about if I normal summon it and I just eat the 2,000 points of damage. That can still be worth it. In any case, it's a consistency piece. You get to search for a level 1. Now, you could be in a really bad situation where if you brick super bad and you draw like 1 or 2 of these and you don't even get a level 1 to put on the field, then you're kind of in trouble because the card only works if you control a level 1, right? So ultimately, that's one of the reasons I took it out. There's another card called Mimighoul Fork, which I think is good enough to run. I just found that I didn't like it enough to keep it in the deck, but it's very cool. It does some cool things. So the only requirement for it is your opponent needs to have a face down monster. And basically when you play Fork, your opponent can either choose to destroy the monster without flipping it and let you draw 2 cards, or they just flip the monster and do the effects, right? And then what's cool about Mimighoul Fork is you can banish it from the graveyard to add another Mimighoul Fork to your hand. So it's an effect that replaces itself. So in a way, it kind of serves as like a pot of greed for the deck, or it's another way to force your opponent to flip a monster. I just found that because it's not a quick effect, I think it would be much better as a quick effect because then I could like interrupt my opponent with it and make them flip. I don't know. I think it's good enough to run, but it does technically depend on your opponent having a face down. So once again, you could just get a really unfortunate draw where you draw forks and don't get a Mimighoul to set to their field, which definitely can happen. Then it becomes a dead card. But I do think it's good enough to run. It's definitely a card I'm going to consider putting back in if I don't like the way my deck is running after so long with some of the cards I'm currently running. But fork is definitely a good card you can run. Now we've got these 2 bad boys. Once again, I'm not running these, but these are kind of a saucy pick that you can run. These cards, I would say, are high risk, high reward cards. If you get their effects off properly, it can literally win you the game. But if things go wrong and you draw them and you get like bricked with them, you can get really screwed. But these are 2 flip effect monsters that do very bad things to the person that flips them. Now, they're different than Mimighouls in that if I draw Fire Sorcerer or Hero Shadow Scout, I cannot just set them to my opponent's field. They're not Mimighouls. So if they're in my hand, they're just stuck, and you do not want to set them to your field because they have very bad effects to you. So pretty much if you draw into these, they simply are just a normal summon that you have to waste to put a body on board, or you could discard them for an effect that requires you to discard, but that's about it. They're a very, very dead draw. The idea with these, though, is you would use these in conjunction with Mimighoul Maker. So these are both flip effects. What Fire Sorcerer says is banish 2 random cards from your hand and inflict 800 damage to your opponent. Hero Shadow Scout says your opponent draws 3 cards. So, and then both players check the cards, and any spell cards among them must be discarded to the graveyard, right? So the idea is you play Mimighoul Maker, you choose both of these, and your opponent's randomly going to get one of them. If they get Sorcerer, you at some point force it to flip, or they have to flip it themselves. They have to banish 2 cards from their hand, and you would take 800 damage, which is whatever. And then Hero Shadow Scout would flip, you would draw 3 cards. So these can give you a huge card advantage either way, because either I'm drawing a bunch or my opponent's banishing 2 from their hand, and in conjunction with Summoning Curse can really rip their hand apart. To me, like I said, it's high risk, high reward. To me, the risk outweighed the reward, so I opted not to play this combo. They are just such dead draws in the deck, and they're just so bricky to run. But I would say if you want to dabble with them, they could be fun cards to play around with, right? Another card I think is interesting is Reverse Reuse. To me, it just seems a little slow because it's a trap card. It's only good in like a later game state, but could be interesting. You target up to 2 flip monsters in your graveyard and special summon them to your opponent's side of the field. So this, it's funny because this is an older card, but literally feels like was made for Mimighoul. Once again, it's only good late game because you have to have an established graveyard, but you can use this as a quick, and this is great. It kind of serves as like a Mimighoul room in a way, but it just requires that you already have stuff in your graveyard. The nice thing is like, if turn 1 I draw this, right, I can set it. I could summon multiple Mimighouls and maybe link them away, or Exceeds, but then detach them for material right away. Try to establish a graveyard. I could almost use this like a Mimighoul room if I have Dungeon in play to put the face downs on their field where then they can't flip them, right? So this is kind of a saucy card that I feel like could be good, just because the nature of it being a trap card might be too slow. But I might dabble with that one, right? Then we have Foolish Burial Goods. This could just be good for like getting graveyard effects of the Mimighoul room or the Mimighoul Maker, right? Because they both have graveyard effects. I just felt like they weren't good enough that I wanted to like use a spot in my deck for Foolish Burial Goods. But it could be good because it just sends a spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard, right? Another one, I think this card's a little underrated, but I think Swords of Revealing Light is actually pretty good. It's one that I do want to play in the main deck. I just didn't find room for it. But it flips all of your opponent's face downs face up. So like turn 1, if I get 3 Mimighouls, I could just set all 3, play swords, and just have them pop off immediately. And then that's another way then I could trigger my Triple Tactics Thrust, right? And my Triple Tactics Talents. So it's a way to just like mass get a bunch of Mimighoul stuff to happen at one time. And then if your opponent can't deal with swords, it's like 3 turns that they can't attack. So I think swords is kind of an interesting play. Terrors in the Hidden City. This card I feel like just is no longer necessary because Mimighouls now with the new support, they can get a lot of power. Oh, because the other thing I forgot to mention about Dungeon, the field card, it makes it so that Mimighouls add their attack to their defense, so they get very strong. They just don't get it the turn they are summoned. So as long as it wasn't the turn they were summoned, they get a huge buff. So what happens with like Mimighoul Master, if he's equipped with a throne, he's 4,000 attack with a dungeon and can attack direct, right? So this, the whole purpose of this card was it basically increased your monster's attack by 1,500, and they just got very beefy. But I feel like this is just completely unnecessary. So Terrors in the Hidden City, because of the new support, I really don't think is worth running anymore. So those, once again, just some other things to try out. And then the last thing I just want to point out is in the extra deck, you could dabble with Leela Rusk monsters. Leela Rusk monsters I did run before the new support came out because they were good rank 1s. And to me, they were just an easy way to get to a Zeus play. One of them in particular could attack direct. I'm not putting all 3 out here, but I think there's 3 different Leela Rusks that you could run. So if you're looking for things to add to your extra deck, you could dabble with those, right? All right, so that was a lot. So that was pretty much the main idea of the deck, what it does, my build, and all that. So let me just show you. I'm going to show you 2 combos here. So once again, I could sit and do draws and explain plays, but I think once you understand the deck, like you should know enough to just kind of play with it. The best thing is to get experience, right? But I'm just going to show you a couple things. I want to show you like what a typical Mimighoul Maker play would be and just explain why. And I'm going to show you just like a simple starting play, right? So let's just say, regardless of what else is in my hand, let's just say I open with a Mimighoul Dragon. Like, how would you operate a turn? And once again, you're going to have other cards to play with, so that's going to change. But let's say I just had a dragon. So usually if I don't have anything and I just summon a dragon, I would go for the field card, right? So I would go into the field card, which would be Mimighoul Dungeon. You activate the dungeon. Then you use Dungeon's effect to search for a Mimighoul monster. Now, what you're going to do typically is you want to search for something you can special summon. So if your opponent controls more monsters, you could get Slime, but usually I'm going to get Armor or Fairy. So let's just say, for example, I want to grab Fairy, because remember, Fairy's condition is just that I need to control a monster. So now I can special Fairy, right? So this is assuming I just have a dragon and nothing else. Now I've got Fairy, I've all of a sudden put 2 on board. Now, from here, depending on what I know my opponent's running, all I need is this. I can do the full Ghostrick play if I just want to end on a Utopic Future, or I would go into a Mimighoul play. So let's say I overlay these two, and then I want to go into a Mimighoul play. So then you could either go into Throne or Giant. I find myself usually going to Giant first, because now Giant is going to add another Mimighoul card to my hand. So now I could go ahead and grab another Mimighoul Monster. So let's say I go ahead and grab, let's say I grab like Armor, right? And let's say in my hand I had a Slime or something as well. Okay, so let's say I just already had that. This could be, now this is an extension where I can just get another card. So let's say I can special summon Slime because my opponent controls more. I could special Armor because they control one. Then I could potentially go into another Xyz play, and then I could maybe go into a Throne, right? It's all going to depend on what other cards you have in your hand. But as a starting point, this is just a hypothetical, right? So then let's say I go into Throne. Then Throne gets summoned. I could detach one and get Master. So I would detach one of these, go into Master. Okay, and then Master's going to come out, and then Master can add one to hand. So now I could just grab, maybe I want to get an Archfiend to just set to their field. Maybe I just grab a Slime, right? I could grab a Slime, set it to their field. Now I've got something face down. Depending on what their field already looks like, I could maybe attack first, then bring this out main phase 2, and then put something face down in their field. Like, there's a lot of different things that you can do here with that, right? But that's just a very simple, like, I was able to generate this all basically with just a dragon, and then you would have to have maybe just one more Mimighoul that you can special summon. But that was a pretty easy board to fill out with very minimal amounts of cards, right? Now, let me explain what I typically do on Mimighoul Maker. So, because that's going to be something that a beginner player is going to want to know to do. When you play Mimighoul Maker, you're going to select any 2 flip effects from the deck, right? So let's just say I play Maker. It's also going to depend on what's in your hand that you already have. But just assuming I don't have any of the Mimighouls in my hand, I play Maker, and there's pretty much 3 monsters you want to choose from. The 3 best ones to choose from here are going to be Dragon, Slime, and Archfiend. And kind of what I've come to the consensus is I always get Archfiend, and then I either get Dragon or Slime. Typically, I'm going to lean Slime over Dragon. Now, the reason why is because there's a little bit of randomness here, right? One's going to go face down to your opponent's field, but then the other goes to your hand, and then you special summon one. So the best case in either scenario, let's say you're doing Dragon or Slime, the ideal thing would be for that to get set to your opponent's field, and then an Archfiend comes to you. Then you immediately special the Archfiend, and it flips whatever went over, right? Slime's great. If this is the best combo you can get. If Slime goes face down and you get Archfiend, you flip the Slime, and then you special anything to your field from your deck. Then you would summon Dragon, get your field card, and this is all off of special summoning, right? So that's going to be the best. And then when the Slime flips, it comes to your field. Look at that. I've already got 3 monsters on my field, and I haven't even normal summoned yet, right? Now, let's say it doesn't go the way you want. Let's say I get Slime to my hand, and then Archfiend sets. This is why I lean the Slime play, because if this is the first thing I do, my opponent now controls more monsters than me. I can at least special summon the Slime for free afterwards. And so let's say in my hand I already had a Dragon, right? So I choose Slime and Archfiend. Let's say they get Archfiend face down, Slime comes to my hand, but Maker says I special summon any Mimighoul from my hand. So then I would special the Dragon, use Dragon's effect to get Dungeon, and then, you know, if my opponent gets another one, I could special Slime, but it just depends on what the situation is. But bare bones, I mean, the Slime could get special summoned just as an extra body, depending on the situation, right? The reason you would want to go Dragon is because you would want, the ideal situation would be to get, you know, Dragon. The thing with this one is kind of good either way, right? So if they get Dragon and I get Archfiend, I can summon the Archfiend to flip the Dragon. The problem is my opponent doesn't have an established field of things to destroy. I might not want to do that right away. But if they get the Archfiend and I get the Dragon, then I can normal the Dragon and get Dungeon, right? But I would say most often with Maker, you want to choose Slime and Archfiend. I think that's pretty much the agreed upon combo that you would choose. But once again, it depends. If you already have Slime in hand, maybe then you want to pick Dragon. That's going to be totally up to you. So anyways, guys, hopefully this helps. It's just like a base introduction to Mimighouls. If you guys have any tips for players, maybe you have some experience as well, feel free to share those. Maybe there's a combo or something I didn't talk about. Feel free to share that. If you have any questions about Mimighoul and my experience, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I also have a Discord. Feel free to follow the link in the description if you want to join my Discord. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.